This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. We speak from our personal experiences and opinions. The views expressed are solely those of the individual speaker and are not intended to malign any group, club, organization, or business.
Hey, folks. Welcome back to Confronting the Line and/or Jon Atack and Friends. And I'm here today with somebody I'm very delighted to call a friend now, Jon Atack, who's been really instrumental for me in deconstructing and unwinding my own, not just my participation, that was pretty easy, but all the things that 27 years inside of the human potential movement landmark style, all the bugs that got implanted there that I didn't quite know about. Jon, you've been a really great resource for me in kind of unprogramming, as it were, finding out what was useful, what was harmful.
Well, and I'm very, very glad of that. And it's been a great pleasure getting to know you. And I've learned a great deal through our association as well, particularly about Werner.
Oh my gosh.
What a
Yeah.
sod. But it's been mutually beneficial. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, thank you. And I've invited Jon to come and be one of our featured speakers at our upcoming second ever Seek Safely Summit, which is a project I'm very committed to, creating get-togethers of people who have expertise in this area of not just cult recovery and all that stuff, but undue influence, manipulation, all these things that are really running rampant in our culture, in our society right now. Always have been there, but with the advent of social media and some of these technology tools, it just really seems like we're in big trouble, to be very honest. So I want to spend my career, my time talking to people who've made it their business to understand this stuff. And I think we're in the best position to hopefully make a difference as we go forward. Anyway, so I want to ask Jon to come on and we wanted to talk a little bit today. Jon, say the name of your most recent book. I can see it behind you. If Scientology Ruled the World, right? Yeah, If Scientology Ruled the World, Nazi occultism, sex magic, space aliens, and the second coming. Folks, I've read it. It is entertaining and very scary. So, because all this stuff is woven together, I really learned from you about the whole Aleister Crowley role and how I can see the legacies very embedded in the human potential movement, which is really the self-help, personal, professional development basis from, I would say, the mid-60s kind of up through 2010, 2012. Still going, of course, but at least there started to be shifts as we've brought in some other things into the self-help world, things like feelings.
Yeah. If you're going to cure a disease, it's good to understand its etiology. So you need to understand its development. What are the stages of development of that particular disease? Um, Having said that, I'm not particularly keen on comparing beliefs to viruses. Actually working on a piece about how silly that is at the moment, but I've started, so I've got to finish now and somehow save what I've just said.
It's a metaphor. Keep it as a metaphor.
It's a metaphor, exactly. But to understand the etiology of whatever group you're in, it's important to understand the history of the group, the history of the group's practices, and the history of the group's founder. I set about that with Scientology. I wrote Let's Sell These People a Piece of Blue Sky many a long year ago. And that was used as the basis for a biography of Ron Hubbard called Barefaced Messiah. Excellent book by Russell Miller. So I think that if you're going to get over the thing, understanding where it came from. So I kept going back. I found in Blue Sky, I'd written about Hubbard's affection for Crowley, which was publicly stated. My very good friend, Alistair Crowley, there's a lecture where Hubbard says that, and he recommends that people read his books and this kind of stuff, which they didn't. So I'd made all of those connections and how Hubbard was involved himself with ritual sex magic, to give it its proper term, the Ordo Templi Orientis, the Order of Eastern Templars. Um, but in this book, I go further. This is the prequel. I mean, I think, the story of Scientology is about the most fascinating story of the 20th century. This incredible thing where this
Really is.
pulp
Yeah.
fiction writer makes all of these ludicrous claims about himself, studied with gurus in the East, in India, Tibet, China, and Mongolia. They're all complete nonsense. 3 of those places he didn't visit. He went to China on 2 holidays with his parents. I've got his daily handwritten journals from those 2 trips. So I'm quite confident about what he did during that time, and none of it included studying with any gurus. He wasn't a nuclear physicist. He wasn't an explorer. He wasn't a war hero. He never saw combat. He wasn't wounded. He didn't cure his wounds. It's all made up, this incredible story, and he then manages to frighten governments, with this movement that's never more than 100,000 people, and he terrifies governments into, the IRS in 1993 declared them tax exempt because they just couldn't take any more, you know?
Well, and then along comes Werner, who the more I study, the more I'm getting clear. I was just telling John offline, I'm like, John, I'm pretty sure Werner was a Scientologist, at least in part, in practice to a certain extent. And then he builds his own brand of, whatnot, and really brings the self-help movement, really commodifies it and brings it into a secular product. I mean, the whole est. I mean, est was the first like culturally, it was here in the US, it wasn't, super huge, but it was huge for its time. I mean, when it starts popping up in sitcoms, I just saw the Mork and Mindy segment, where they mock a session of est. It's hilarious.
Always worth watching.
Well,
Good old Mork.
I have some questions for you, John, as we go into. So I asked John to be a part of the Seek Safely Summit because we're going to have a whole section on education. And I'm going to be working with John as we go forward to really develop some accessible education for people to truly understand how they how they end up manipulated. Not quite sure how to say that so people can really hear it. But folks, if you think you can't be manipulated, you're first in line. If you think you cannot be influenced, you're influenced already. There isn't anything that we do in our society that isn't part and party to those kinds of functions. And we have to understand them. We have to understand them so we can see what we're in the midst of and what's really happening. And then we actually have agency, autonomy, and choice, but not when we don't understand ourselves and how we're being moved about, as it were.
Yeah, I've just had a video that I did with Mayim Bialik, and in the comments, somebody had written, "You gave money to Scientology, full stop. Idiot, full stop." And so my response was, "You've never been deceived, full stop. Genius, full stop." It's like, what? You're that stupid,
Yeah.
And getting involved in buying a belief system. I mean, come on, the things that people believe in this world. I had this guy, he was a Baptist minister, and I was working with the churches because they had programs down in south of England. They had programs that the only thing that they could all collaborate on was Scientology. They all disliked that. There was nothing else. So this was churches together in East Grinstead, and I worked with them for a couple of years. And one day, one of the Baptist ministers, and the Baptists were willing to be in the same room as the Catholic, but they knew he was the devil. And the Catholic wouldn't be in the same room as the Baptist. So it was the churches kind of untogether in East Grinstead that I was working with, and I have to see them separately. Anyway, I was with the Baptist minister, one of these Baptist ministers, and he said, "Do they really believe that 75 million years ago, this evil prince rounded up all these people from all these planets and blew them up in volcanoes and put all this stuff in their heads?" And I looked at him and I was just not thinking. Often I don't. I looked at him and I said, there are people who believe there was a bloke who could not only walk on water, but turn it into wine. And then he blushed beetroot red, which I'd never seen before. And I went, okay. And it's like, yeah, 2 billion people, 3 billion people in the world believe in miracles. So we're sold ideas about things that we haven't seen, and we're willing to believe them. Those people who are arrogant enough to think that they're invulnerable are, as you say, the most vulnerable people. They're very easy to recruit.
Well, that's perfect. That leads to one of my first questions. So, in your research, you point out how authoritarian groups often lure people with the promise of total freedom or unlocking incredible personal power, but it ultimately becomes what you call the perfect trap. How can someone seeking personal growth tell the difference between a program that will genuinely empower them and one that'll set a trap? So, what's just a couple of nuggets that you would offer for that?
Well, the first thing is check the internet these days, check the web, and see what's being said about personal group. And you'll very often If there are people, I've looked at groups. A friend of mine headed an Italian group called the Focolare, which grew up within the Catholic Church during the Second World War in the air raid shelters. And they're a Christian group. And there's a book about them called The Pope's Armada, big fat book, which suggests they're a horrible, terrible cult. Okay, so I went and talked to my friend about it, who for a while did head this group. And I'm perfectly happy to say that they're a group of people who seek to live Christian lives, and I applaud that. And you can find something out. So find out about the group, find out where it came from, what it is, look what critics have to say. But sometimes you'll find, as I did in this case, that the criticism is probably exaggerated. Very often it isn't. When I got into Scientology in 1974, I phoned up a psychiatrist I knew to see if she knew about it. She said, don't know anything about it. I phoned up an Anglican minister. I was not Christian myself, but seemed like a good place to
Good
go. He
point
said,
of reference.
yeah. He said, don't know anything about it. And in I went. Now, had they sort of stopped and thought for a minute, they'd have gone, he's 19 years old, wet behind the ears. Let's go and check and we'll call him back. He's calling
Mm,
us. And what they would have found, if they'd thought about it, was that just 3 years before, there had been a massive government report in the UK which ripped Scientology apart. It was all over the news. I was, of course, like 15, 16
right.
when this came out, so I wasn't paying any attention. They should have done something. So finding somebody who knows about it, finding a source about it. There is, of course, we say of Scientology, there's no such thing as a free personality test. You are actually providing answers to 200 questions of an intimate nature, which, if they were the CIA and knew what they were doing, would tell them everything they need to know in terms of manipulating you. So don't offer up information to strangers. Don't take sweets from them and don't give them information. And when somebody comes at you with a big smile on your face, as if they've known you all your life, I know it seems cynical, but wonder what it is they're trying to sell.
Yeah. What's
And
that
they
question? Who benefits, right? Like,
Yeah,
and then, I don't know that that would have protected me from Landmark. I don't know that being protected from Landmark is even now something I would have liked to have not stayed in there so long. But I mean, that's had grave impacts. And then the level of involvement that I got had grave impacts. But just doing a course or two, lots of people do a course or two. It's fine. They get some insight and they go on with their lives. In the question, anything promising total anything, total freedom, total,
will solve all
power.
your problems.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and let me pull you up on that one point, that
Yeah.
with ex-Scientologists, they will usually tell you that the lower levels are fine, that the beginning courses are good, that they learn things, they acquired things. The very first course used to be the communication course, and it's still very early on, and you do the training routines. When Steve Hassan, who is a leading student of hypnosis, he's an Ericksonian trainer, he's qualified to train people in hypnotism. He does not use it in his practice, but one understands that it's something that's going on all the time. When he's also a leading cult expert. When he
That's right.
first saw training routines demonstrated, he said, this is the most overt use of hypnosis I've ever seen in any cult. Now, I would say the same thing about the early stages in S, that if you go to that first seminar, you're having all sorts of manipulative material. And we both know John Hunter, who's done the most important work on it in his book, Manufacturing Mania, where he says, no, you're having hypomania induced in you. So what most of these groups want to do, and they do, is induce a sense of euphoria, get a peak experience out of you, get you high, where your reasoning is not at its best when you're high, that's for sure. But also, getting high doesn't mean getting better.
Right. And that's the conflation to this day. So I came along in 1995. Est was whoever even heard of that. I mean, it was long gone. But I now know a lot about it. And not just from having worked with Werner, but having talked to so many Estes. But to this day, you'll still talk to somebody who did Est and they'll be like, oh my God, it changed my life. But what they're remembering is the experience, not necessarily the result. And they've shown this now that peak experiences, aha's awe actually sticks with us longer than pain. We're actually designed to forget pain. Any woman who's given birth can tell you all about this. We would not live as a species if we were not engineered to forget pain. Trust me. So we've given birth to two, and we're actually engineered to forget that more or less. Our body remembers to a certain extent and will react when it senses danger. But for the most part, not so much. But we do remember those awe experiences. I mean, even people with dementia will remember their peak experiences in life, maybe their wedding, or something that really imprinted on them emotionally. Well, let me ask you this, because your latest book, talks a lot about the authoritarianism and totalitarianism, which is we're seeing now just going crazy in our world. Why do you think the pursuit of self-improvement so frequently gets hijacked by authoritarian leaders? Because we're seeing a lot of it. This was the big lesson for me, is that something positive could be weaponized and used to manipulate and control and exploit people. I still wrestle with that sometimes because at heart I'm sort of Pollyanna. My best friend says I still believe in unicorns and puppies, but
Of course you do.
I do.
There are puppies in the world. It's true. I'm sure there are
Yes,
puppies.
and there's great unicorn movies. There's no real unicorns, but there's great unicorn movies.
Yeah, exactly. And they all eat marshmallows and go over the rainbow somewhere.
Yes. But why hijack that?
Well, there's a part of our nature. I mean, in this other book, Opening
Yes, my
Our
favorite.
Minds, I tried to get into
Mandatory reading in my library.
a good thing. I approve of that. That we want to belong if we're social beings, and this does not apply to the antisocial personality. They don't want to belong. They want us to belong to them. So we're social, but we're also trained in obedience from childhood. Every time I say this, recommend the book Intelligent Disobedience by my great friend Ira Taylor. And we're trained to be obedient in school. You're not trained to say no. You're not trained to say, hang on a minute, could you explain that? And I don't want to. So Ira put this great little video, Blink Think, which you can find when Spike puts this up, we'll get it to find the description. It's just a few minutes where it's to teach a 4-year-old that when an adult says something, you're allowed to blink and think, do I agree with that? Do I accept that? And if
Mm,
you don't understand, you're allowed to say, I don't understand. You're allowed to assert yourself. So then you've got this other awful thing called groupthink. As part of our belonging, we will just go along with what the people around us say,
right.
um, and believe with them. Then somebody comes along and they've got a technique to get you high. Now, this can be staring at things. Sorry, meditation. Sorry, mindfulness. Sorry, zazen. Staring at things. Now, sitting quietly and breathing deeply, I'm all for that. Listen to a nice, gentle piece of music, look at a bunch of flowers or a lovely painting. I'm all for that. That's really good. Fixedly staring at something, which is fundamental to pretty much all practices of meditation, actually messes with your brain. It causes something called the Ganzfeld effect. And
Mm.
you'll start to hallucinate. If you don't hallucinate when you're doing it, there's something wrong with your brain because the sensitivity is being turned up because there's no stimulus coming in. And same is
That
true
You
in
just
it.
relieved me from where I study, they do use meditation. They don't teach it that way to do a fixed stare, but you do more like the first thing you said. But anyway, okay, I used to work at this yoga guy and he had meditation as part of his thing. And people would have all these like crazy experiences. And I always thought something was wrong with me that I didn't. So, and now I've been with this group. I study with the Ridwan School, Diamond Approach. Anyway, for 13 years, I love it. I enjoy it very much. And, no big religious experiences, no nothing. I listen quietly to music and just sit and just notice what's going on in my body and, just kind of, like that. But I've always thought, "Something's wrong with me that I haven't had those hallucinations." So thanks, you just relieved me from that whole problem.
Yeah, I mean, anything that fixes perception will cause euphoria, you get high, and it will turn up the sensitivity and the inwardness. We're in a bizarre world where people are actually recommending mindfulness meditation for depression and anxiety and claiming that there's a scientific basis for this. Now, It's a couple of years since I looked into this, but I did look into it. And there were Newell Farias at Oxford said his grad students, and he's a mindfulness meditator, okay? That's which way he's pointed. But he said his students found more than 3,000 supposed studies of meditation, of which somewhere over 30 actually met the criteria for a scientific study. So there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of babble.
Well, and if you've worked with people who have my daughter has complex trauma, and I had some of my clients are very into meditation. She can't even sit in the room when it's happening.
You need your attention outward if you're depressed or anxious. You need society. You need to talk with people. You need to engage, and you need encouragement and support. If you sit and focus on yourself, it won't make it better. The only study I found was one for social anxiety that mindfulness had been helpful with, and that's fine. But so fixation, repetition, and mimicry, they're
Mm.
three techniques, and you can pick up anybody in the street and you say, all right, what I want you to do is breathe really quickly. Go, who. And that's a Rajneeshi technique, by the way. And what you're doing is hyperventilation. You're not, sorry, hypoventilation. You're not getting enough air.
Oxygen.
And you'll actually oxygenate your blood. You'll over-oxygenate your blood by doing it because you're not getting rid of the carbon dioxide. And so get into this situation where you'll be dizzy and high. You'll get high, you'll get euphoric. And that, my great friend Yuval Laor, we have a variety of videos that I've done with him. He studied awe and belief to PhD and created a model showing how you can bring about these experiences in people that will make them go, well, you were able to make me feel high, so you must know everything, you know?
Well,
And
you're very suggestible. When you're high, you're super
yep,
suggestible. You can, and that's kind of what happens. I mean, in a very simplistic version, when I was talking with Dr. John Hunter, I realized like that's what happens on Sunday at the Landmark Forum is you're high. The whole room is high. So you got all the group thing. They call it the group dynamic there. Anyway, and, and then somebody has an insight. They're having this feeling and they have an insight. And then well, what's happening? And they they go to the mic and they say, oh, I just saw, and you do have insights. I'm not going to lie. But then the whole room is like, I had an insight too. I had an insight too. One of the things I will give, it's a little interesting. Chris often teases me. He says Landmark barely qualifies as a cult, but it is a cult. But you get to fill in within certain parameters what your transformation is. So the leader doesn't tell you. The leader tells you you're having a transformation. That's transformation, which they then commodify and turn into a product and sell you lots of programs so you can have more of that high. Now you do, well, what did you transform? And then you literally think something up. And sometimes it's useful and sometimes it's harmful.
yeah,
And that's
and you,
exactly how Dr. John how he describes hypomania is, people do miraculous things in the middle of full-on manic episodes and hypomanic episodes, but they also do a lot of destructive things. It's kind of like crapshoot, literally.
yeah, and it's not a safe condition. I mean, John's own experience of mania.
Well, especially in the hands of leaders. And look, guys, I trained. I was a senior trained landmark leader. I know their work inside out, upside down, round and round. They're not trained. They're not trauma informed. They're not trained in things like mania. They're not, they're trained to see if somebody's sleep deprived because they've had a number of people go cuckoo in their courses and then cause all kinds of problems because they didn't sleep. So they know about that. But other than that, not much. Well, there's another idea, and I'm actually writing an article about this. I did a show for my new Patreon channel about this idea that I have found in almost every self-help everything called responsibility, 100% responsibility. So to me, it's a trend for victim blaming. This idea that you're 100% responsible for every bad thing that happens to you. They're the source of the good things. You're 100% responsible and the source of the bad things. You've written about how this exact philosophy erodes compassion and empathy. How does that mindset make participants vulnerable to abuse? I'm getting so much pushback on this right now because it's a sacred cow in Landmark world, 100% responsibility. So my Landmark people are like, but Anne, you just don't get the distinction. Trust me, folks, I get it better than you because I actually get the harms that happen and the lies in it. But I'm just curious, What do you see about that whole responsibility trope and how that gets misused or
Well,
abused?
yeah, I mean, the thought I, as an individual, one of 8 billion human beings, am seeking to fulfill my wishes magically, am attracting towards me, the law of attraction, the good and the bad, 8 billion people. And hang on, the universe is a little bigger than that, isn't it? Well, yeah, our galaxy, the Milky Way, has 100,000 million stars. Our sun is one of the little ones. Okay. And well, right, how many galaxies are there, John? Well, last year, the James Webb Telescope reached its limit, which was 780,000 galaxies. Now, all of this has to be interconnected. If
Mm,
an ant farts on planet Earth, then that has the ripple effect, and the whole universe is all connected. Quantum entanglement. The New Age loves that. Doesn't understand it, but it loves it. The complexity of everything being integrated in that fashion. It's a thing called Laplace's demon, which is the idea that if you knew the position of every atom in the universe for one moment, you could predict everything that will happen. I mean, I question that idea, but if you knew, the problem is that you would need a machine bigger than the universe to make this calculation.
mm,
And you've got this same problem. So, I'm going to give a different number. I've stuck with 419 for a long time. 79 people get onto an aeroplane and it crashes. How on earth can you possibly karmically say all of these people are going to? It means that we're all robots. It means it's like we are in a simulation. It is the damn matrix. And just don't take the pill. Don't take either of the pills, please. Don't take any of the pills. You have made yourself part of a simulation if you believe that everything that happens to you is determined by you. It's mathematically absolutely impossible. Now, the place that Werner gets it from is Scientology. I had a very good friend, my friend Shona Foxness, and she one day she came to me and she said, "John, why are you bothering with all of these Scientologists? They've all pulled it in." And there is the Hubbard phrase, pulled it in. And I looked at her and said, "Shona, 4-year-old child is just about to go in front of a bus. Do you go, 'Child's pulled it in,' or do you reach the child and pull them out of the way? You tell me, who's responsible?" And the truth is, if we have compassion, then we're willing to be responsible for others. If we have no compassion, we're psychopaths. And that's what's being demanded within this philosophy. And it's what it creates. It creates people who are utterly narcissistic, are only concerned about, you know, don't harsh my mellow. I'm thinking my
right.
way towards being a super being or what have you. No, responsibility is not the idea that you are the agent of everything, the captain of your ship, whatever, the agent of everything that happens to you. It's understanding that situations and the universe around us actually does stuff, whether I like it or not. There is ultraviolet radiation out there. There are
Right.
cosmic rays. There are all of these wonderful things happening. And it is a universe of chance and coincidence. It is not a deterministic universe. And it's really weird that people who will accuse me of being materialistic for saying that are actually willing to do something that's so simplistic that they believe they, in fact, utterly, in the end, with so many, I mean, how many living beings are there on this planet? According to the Hindu view, all of us, everything, every maggot, every amoeba has consciousness. And so the Akashic records, the record of karma, are crammed. Every time a giant clam gives off 2,000 million babies, every one of them is recorded in the book of karma and everything that's got to happen to it. Oh, come on. It's way too complicated. So accepting that you may well have free will, you may well have some agency and be able to do something, but you're not controlling the weather. If all 8 billion of us are all praying for different kinds of weather, then you're not controlling the weather. These are silly ideas.
Okay, so here, let me tell you what Warner, oh, this is going to be fun. So let me tell you what Werner did with that idea. So the manifestation, so you just really laid out, and I didn't realize it came from Hubbard's original interpretation of responsibility, but what I call the manifestation culture, right? Which came along huge when The Secret came out and all that, but
Rhonda
this whole
Byrne, yeah.
manifestation culture. Werner's early essay, I don't know what Werner personally was into. I have a hard time picturing, because I'm going to tell you what Werner's version of it is. So Werner's version of it
Show
is,
me the money, I think was his version of it.
yeah, he never said that part out loud though. So but his version of responsibility is it's not a truth, it's a stand one takes. It's a point of view that one takes. It's not a truth. It's I'm 100% responsible for this situation is a stand that I take, a choice that I make in a situation, in a relationship or a circumstance. And it immediately gives me and provides me with some power.
So it's
So
like Spike Milligan's book, Hitler, My Part in His Downfall, you know. Of course, the reason that Hitler fell is because Spike Milligan told a joke about him. I'm totally responsible for Hitler.
for
What?
me, this fits perfectly into, the era of the S training, the 60s, 70s, whatnot. See, Werner's talent was he made all these wacky ideas kind of normal, kind of business approved, sort of thing. So yes, can I take the case that Dave and I get in a fight and I can look, okay, my big problem is with the 100% part. I'm 100% responsible for this fight. Well, I don't know. Probably not. I might be responsible for maybe I said something snarky or mean or
Bit,
unkind or
I'm a little bit wrong, you're a little bit right, in the words of the Beatles.
yeah. But here's the thing. To me, it conveniently always has the benefit of letting the predator and perpetrator off the hook, because you can get the victims of your predatory behavior it's gaslighting. It's really a very powerful gaslighting thing. And it's powerful because in the moment I say, I caused it. Kind of what you were talking about with manifestation. Like, I caused it to be the gorgeous sunny out here today. I caused it to be sunny today with my intention and my will. So that's this kind of like magical thinking is what the person who trained me would have called that. But also, will I cause that in my relationship with my husband? The chances of that having me miss predatory behavior is like 100%. So even if you take it out of the magical thinking, the manifestation thinking, and you try to apply it to an interconnected social species that live in, social groupings, like human beings are social animals, and you walk in there, the asshole trying to be 100% responsible for everything, you are the asshole in the room because you're running over everybody else. You're taking their agency, their autonomy. You're inserting your will. It's a very dominator friendly kind of idea.
If we talk about, the cliche is it takes two to tango, that for any fight to occur, there's responsibility on both sides. And you kind of go, so this is like the judge who dismissed the rape case because the young woman was wearing a short skirt. She was asking for it. And it's like, no, it doesn't work that way. The rapist is the rapist. And it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter how much provocation there was. The rapist is the rapist. The murderer is the murderer. She asked me to murder her. It's like, okay, that's against the law.
Well, and funny, so Ginny Brown, so the Brown family is who started the Seek Safely organization, and it's with them that I'm working on and hosting this summit. And they started that out of this horrible tragedy. Their daughter, Kirby, so the summit is in honor of Kirby's legacy. Kirby died in an ill-run sweat lodge at a spiritual warrior retreat led by James Arthur Ray. James Arthur Ray, who's passed away last year, but James Arthur Ray was, he was featured on Oprah. He was in The Secret. He was one of these big guys. They did eventually charge him with some very light, like manslaughter. So 3 people died in that sweat lodge. 28 people were taken, I think it's 28, 20 some were taken to the hospital. 2 died at the hospital. I think Kirby actually died on scene. 3 people died in that incident. And when it does eventually go to trial, the judge apologizes to James Arthur Ray for having to hold him to some account for the deaths of these 3 people. Because, of course, James Arthur Ray, and you can read the story, and it's a fantastic book by Jean, Kirby's sister, and Ginny, her mom, called This Sweet Life. I'll put it in the show notes and make sure Spike gets it too. It's a fantastic book. But he was, of course, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen." And this is another article I'm going to write pretty soon, the difference between intention and impact. We have very little skill at differentiating between the two. But even if
For
he
sure.
didn't intend to kill people, he did. But the judge was apologetic in having to, and I think he got sentenced to like 2 years and he ended up serving like half of that. For the
Death of 3
literally
people.
any reasonable person with a duty of care could know how they set up and what they did that week. It's surprising that that was the first time people died, honestly, when you
I
hear
can
that.
give a specific parallel to that in Scientology.
Mhm.
Ron Hubbard introduced something which was originally called the Sweat Program and then became the Purification Rundown. It's still run. During the course of this, you spend several hours, about 4 hours a day, in a sauna. You're meant to have cold showers. I didn't. And every day you'd take more and more vitamins and minerals, going up to an absolutely ludicrous quantity. And the problem is, when it was first done, there were people who would be on it for a very long time, and the sauna temperature was wrong in the issue. So while I was still involved, there was a guy I knew who was a black belt in 2 martial arts. He was a very bright guy, and he went off and he spent nearly 150 days in Florida doing this purification rundown. And he insisted that the temperature be set to what it said in the Hubbard bulletin. And the next time I saw him, a black belt in 2 martial arts, he was in a wheelchair and he couldn't answer a question put to him. He'd evidently had a terrible, I hope he recovered, but I'm not sure he would have done. Later on, after I'd left, I interviewed a doctor uh, who told me that when the purification rundown was first done in East Grinstead, which would be the late 1970s, I think, 2 people died on it. Now, I remember seeing a report of one of them that this guy who was a Scientologist was found dead lying in the road with his bicycle, and there was no explanation as to what had happened to him. So people were dying. Nobody has ever been held responsible for those deaths. And where are we? Where are our governments? Where is law enforcement? Why do they back away from this? The human trafficking that's going on. I put up a piece this week with this wonderful young man, Amir, who has left Scientology in January. He was working on the staff at Edinburgh. He says there are about 25 staff, and about half of them are 16 years old or younger. They're not going to school. They're
Oh,
working full time. They're not being paid. And he talks about a 14-year-old girl who is the medical liaison officer. So if you to have any medical treatment, Scientology, you have to see the medical liaison officer. And she gives what are called nerve assists, which are fundamentally she's lying people down on their back and their front and running her fingers over their body. So I'm kind of going, this is Jeffrey Epstein. What are we talking about? Why is nobody doing anything about this anywhere in the world? What is the craven cowardliness of our governments and law enforcement that they just walk away from this? I've been reporting this stuff for 40 years.
but see, this is exactly we're gonna have another segment in the, Seek Safely Summit where we're bringing in some lawyers and some, representatives. So Seek Safely, they've been sponsoring a bill that'll be the first consumer protection bill that is directed towards self-help and wellness industry in the United States, and it'll be in the state of
Yeah,
New York. It's one step away from being approved. It's an incredible accomplishment. So
yeah.
we're gonna be talking to that representative and some of the lawyers. But here, and this leads to what was my final question for you today. But to me, part of where's the law enforcement, where's this and that, our laws are not, they don't bring psychology into account. They don't bring in coercion. I mean, in the United States, coercion is when somebody has a gun to your head, or a knife to your throat. The woman who helped prosecute the One Taste case, which is this insane sex masturbation cult thing. She actually did get a conviction, and in part because she was able to actually show the coercion of these employees, the coercive control of having your living, your reputation, your everything, your self, your sense of self on the line, and how we can be manipulated to do the most awful things. There's this fantastic movie, which of course Spike's going to ask me for the name of. Spike, I don't know, but I'll send it to you. I swear to God, if I find it. But it's a documentary that tries to answer the question about early Nazism and about why there was a certain segment of young men who were in the army in the very early days, and when they were ordered to take, groups of Jewish people into the woods and shoot them, and they wouldn't do it. They were totally alienated, completely bullied, given the worst assignments, and they were shunned, they were thrown out of their communities and their families. So pretty soon, to survive, you capitulate. And our laws don't account for any of that. I mean, we're talking about kind of extreme cases here. The mild cases are when I get convinced to buy the stupid ketchup full of sugar because the ad has got a cute jingle, right? Like, that's the mellow, but it's the same psychology, actually. The
I
same
think we
stuff
should
as that
send them to
snake.
prison as well.
We
Cute,
should.
cute, cute jinglers.
Everything in the United States has added sugar. Just what I can eat when I'm there in the UK versus what I can eat here. It's like, it's stunning. So
Yeah,
you're really candid about your own experiences as a young man, noting that you suffered from the delusion of thinking, I'd never fall for that. So, why do you think it's so important we break this stigma around being deceived by manipulative groups and gurus and things like this, to the point, like we just said, people are dying because of these things.
yeah, and it does come down to what is mistakenly being called coercive control. I say mistakenly because coercion means intimidation, force, or threat, and coercive control means none of those things. It's courtesy
That
of
makes a lot of sense, actually, what you just said, yeah. Well, that explains the problem in the laws too, right? So the laws will do coercion.
well, and it's it's Evan Stark, I think, particularly who gave us this term, and it's like the word narcissist, which the last thing that narcissists are is narcissistic. They're not saying, "Oh, I'm so wonderful, I'm so wonderful, I love myself." They're saying, "Somebody love me, somebody please love me." It's so words can be misapplied, and I think it's important. But so in this country since 2015, we've had the Coercive Control Act, which should be called the Non-Coercive Control Act, but it only relates to intimate couples. Yeah, well, why wouldn't it apply in authoritarian groups? Why wouldn't it apply in non-sexual relationships? If it is possible to psychologically do this, and it's got nothing to do with whether you've been intimate with the person or not, though you may end up being intimate with them and not wanting to, it's got to do with the admission that people can influence us, that although we all know that advertising doesn't work on us, we also know it works on other people. We know we're not gullible, but we know other people are gullible. Well, there's the we've lost all of our defenses. I spent 2 evenings interviewing a guy who'd been at the highest level in Scientology. He had worked on the watchdog committee, the 14 people who Hubbard gave orders to and who ran Scientology. He was 19 years old. He'd grown up in the group, and we had to meet in secret because it was very dangerous for him to be talking to me at this point. So he told me everything he knew over 6 or 7 hours over these 2 evenings. At the end of it, he looked at me and he said, "John, the great thing is we'll never be tricked again." And I just looked at him and said, "No, the great thing is I know I'm gullible. The great thing is I know I can be tricked. It makes me a bit more cautious. And
Right.
that gives me at least some protection. But once you start thinking you are a living God, an all-knowing being that nobody can get anything past, sorry,
Yeah,
you
you're
know,
in deep trouble.
you've probably got a ring through your nose and are being pulled along.
Well, and I think, I still think this because did I mention puppies and unicorns? But I do
There
still
are such things as puppies. I insist. I've seen
I
them.
know you might point out that these next ones are probably not puppies and unicorns, but I still kind of relate to them. But I actually think the people who are running Landmark now, I know them. I know them well. And I'm pretty sure they have no idea that the level of manipulation and control and coercion and cultiness. I know they don't know. They're very mad at me for using the C word in my book, right? So is this a cult, I asked. And the answer, guys, is yes. Once you're on staff, as soon as you have an accountability, yes, you're in a cult. Before that, you're probably in a program that's being offered by a cult and you're on your way. And I do mean destructive cult because I think there's there's plenty of benign cults out there. There's cult of personality, all that. But they really do think they're changing the world. They really do think that 100% responsibility, for example, is an answer to so many problems. We can look out in the world and go, yeah, more people being responsible for their impact in the world, their impact in their families, their impact in their neighborhood. I have a whole litter thing. Anyway, I'm constantly picking up garbage, their impact of leaving garbage around. And all of that, sure, that's helpful, but it's also not a panacea. It's not a thing. And everybody taking 100% responsibility for everything actually leads to more madness, not less. But they believe it. They believe they're doing something good because they don't understand they've been psychologically manipulated, but they actually don't understand their own work. I'd be pretty confident to say the guy who's in charge of R&D at Landmark would argue that the forum and advanced course are not large group awareness trainings.
Yeah. And
And so, of course, they're not looking at the negative impacts of large group awareness trainings and mitigating for that because they're not that.
yeah, I mean, let's look to, a good solid definition, which I do give in Opening Our Minds, that a destructive cult is a group or movement exhibiting a great or excessive devotion or dedication to some person, idea, or thing, and employing unethical, manipulative, or coercive techniques of persuasion and control designed to advance the goals of the group's leaders to the possible or actual detriment of members, their families, or the community. Any involvement with a group that's doing that, and unfortunately, so many groups within our society. Look at what happened during the abuse scandals that Spotlight pointed out within the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Catholic Church covered it up.
Yes.
The Catholic Church covered it up. Then we found out this was going on in the Jehovah's Witnesses. So there was a defector who said, Barbara Anderson, who said she'd seen a list of 23,000 abusers.
Ugh.
They were not willing to share that with law enforcement. They were actually recruiting people who'd been convicted and forgiving them and then letting them marry the widows who had children.
That's another one I'm going after pretty soon. That's my next thing is forgiveness is the BS forgive. No, the only people you need to forgive is yourself. That's, when
And I'm all for forgiveness, but I do not forget. I don't see why I should forget. And so if you've gone into a prison and recruited somebody who's there having raped a child, and you then say, Jesus has now forgiven you, you can marry this widow who has 4 children. 23,000 offenders on that list. Then the scandal just kept going. We found that it was in the Anglican Church. We found that it was in the Methodist Church. We found it was in the Boy Scout movement. We found there were various coaches, sports coaches who were doing this. And the natural response of the churches, which are meant to be good bodies, was to cover it up,
Mm.
to say, well, it'll make our group look bad. Now, every now and then, and I think Pope Francis was probably the first to say, we've just got to admit it. We've got to tell the truth. And the same has happened in the Anglican Church, I'm happy to say. But that natural thing of saying, well, your group is a cult, your group is destructive. If you talk to a Mooney and you say Scientologist, they'll say, oh, that's a cult. But we're not. Well, if something is taking control of your time, of your environment, of your thoughts,
your resources, your money, and your landmark is big on, they want you to get at all of your community because you're their marketing tool.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and what you were selling, I had somebody again who came on the Mayim Bialik podcast in the comments and said that what I needed to do was a landmark seminar.
My
And
God, I
so I
haven't
said,
listened to that
"Ha
whole thing
ha."
yet. I've only listened to part of it. It's really good.
Well, yeah, it was fun. And obviously there are people who have a very different perspective of the world to me. If you look at the videos, they normally do, but they were delightful. They were
One
friendly
sign,
and
folks, red flag, you're in a cult, is if you think your philosophy, your idea, your thing will fix everything. Cult alert, cult alert.
yeah, and when you start, I mean, one of the main things is the sense of gnosis. I know, and you don't.
Mhm.
And gnosis is the spiritual knowledge. We have the word agnostic, though people like me who don't know anything, and then we have gnosis. Now, when the Gnostics, who were of course exterminated by the early Christian churches, let's not get too sentimental about this. They were put out of business completely. But their groups had what they called the electoi. And the electoi were people who had become enlightened. We have the word elect from that, just as we have the word mystery from the Mysties, the cults
Mm,
that taught
right.
resurrection after death, and which crept into various religions from its origins in Greece. But these ideas they come along and people grab it. So if you think that you are special, that your group is superior to all other groups, that you have the knowledge of everything, sorry, you know, you're a bigot. That's all you've achieved. If you cannot accept that your knowledge is incomplete, that you're imperfect, and that other people who are not members of your cult might know something, there's a difference there. And I think it is that absolutism that so many of these people come along. I was watching this great Krishnamurti video the other week, and he's talking to the Krishnamurti Society, right? And he says, "Don't join anything." I'm going, well, there's a piece of good advice. Don't
Thank
give yourself to something. I mean, the Krishnamurti Society are all going there, going, you're all individuals. We're all individuals. You are all different. We
This
are
is
all
very much how
different.
Landmark is too, because they'll tell you, like, "No, this isn't the only thing." They won't say it out loud, but the implication, the action, the movement just by that person who commented, their total expression of it, "But this is the best thing." You know?
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
like so, anything that has that kind of, all-encompassing effect is gonna be a really dangerous thing to start to dismantle and watch out for. Well, John, thank you so much. I know your throat's rough, so I don't wanna wear it out today, but I'm just really looking forward to the summit and the conversations, you and Chris and Rachel Bernstein, the folks at the Seek Safely organization. Ginny will be there, and, Jean, of course, and just the whole gang and a few others. We still have people jumping on board, and, it's a simple one-day Zoom summit, and we have ticket prices that are set for students, all the way up to cover your costs to contribute a little something back into the organization. So,
And everybody
anyway,
gets a free unicorn.
that's right, exactly, and a free ticket to your local pet pound. I'm a big dog rescuer, so I have 2 rescues. Anyway, you can go rescue a puppy.
Go and rescue a puppy.
I highly recommend it. They're actually, much more reliable than humans.
That's true.
They're pretty great. So, John, thank you so much, and more to come.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much.